Kieran has very kindly come today to have a little chat with me. So do you want to introduce yourself and really tell us a little bit about you and what you do and, just
Sure,
basically your background?
sure, absolutely. My name's Kieran Rose, and I am a writer first and foremost. I blog at theautisticadvocate.com, and I write about my experiences about being autistic, growing up undiagnosed, and basically, yeah, just what it's like to be autistic. I also am an activist, so I do a lot of offline stuff supporting parents, but online and offline supporting parents, but also supporting campaigns as well, so that fighting for autistic rights basically and getting equality for autistic people.
That's brilliant. It sounds really, really good. I know obviously went to one of the protests with Emma, and
Yeah,
I think all the work you do there is just brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So I can't thank you enough for all the support and help that you're giving autistics. Is
thank you to you as well, because it's people like you that put the message out as well, that gets it out to the general public and things. So don't do yourself a disservice by thanking me. Thank yourself as well.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to basically get the word out and just educate people because, at the start of my journey, I was uneducated and
Hmm.
I didn't know what I know now. And you're only as good as what you know. So I
Yeah,
think it's important, to get the information out there. And a lot of people do want to embrace that, and they do want to learn, and they do want to move forward in their journey. So I think,
absolutely.
yeah, it's important. So
It
today
is.
I'm going to touch on about language, aren't we? About
Yeah.
the correct sort of terms and why we don't like with autism and why we prefer autistic, for
Mhm.
instance. So what does it mean to you to use the right sort of language? How do you feel about that? What does that mean to you?
It covers the using the kind of correct terminology covers a lot of different areas. Personally, for me, I'm autistic. It's a given. I don't have autism. I'm not with autism. I don't carry it around with me. We don't. I've got two autistic children. We don't live with autism. There isn't an extra bedroom tacked on the back of the house that autism can live in. So it's that kind of loose general kind of thing first of all.
Yeah.
And I think it impacts, well, when I was advertising the live that we were supposed to be doing a few minutes ago that we're doing now, I said a lot about how the language can impact on the autistic person or child's self-esteem, their mental health, how it affects how education and health services look at them, and it's all very wrapped up in negativity, and autism being something that can be separated from the autistic person or the autistic child, and then if you do that, if you separate it, it's something that you look at and you think, well, if it's separate, then we can address it, we can treat it, we can, so it feeds into all the cures and everything like that. And it's this whole culture of negativity that we have around autism is very much rooted in the language that is used around it by professional people, by parents who listen to professional people, by the media, everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a talk yesterday for some specialist autism teachers for the teaching team, and a few of them had a medical background. One had been a nurse, and she was saying that they would always say that you should say with autism,
Yeah,
like with diabetes or
yeah.
with the condition. But
Mhm.
what I was trying to say is that it's not a condition.
Yeah.
It's just a being. It's just a way a person is. It's their neurology.
Yeah. It's our identity. It's part of
Yeah,
our identity. It's a huge thing, and you're absolutely right. And it's kind of, but that, even the with autism and the having autism, that only really started in about the 1980s. Mackie, who's an advocate, is in the Autistic Cooperative. They did some research, and the earliest usage that they could found was about 1983, and it all started around like identity politics and things like that, and political correctness and things, and like you treat the person and not the condition, and it is very much that pathological medical model again, and that's that. So it's only actually really recently that this has all started being used, and before that it was autistic people, or obviously there were lots of different names and labels for autism back then, but it is a very recent thing, and it's something that's been brought into common language by professionals and by the medical profession. And again, like we said, it's been reinforced by parents and the media, and who don't know any better. That's the thing. There's a big lack of, and there's a lack of knowledge and understanding of why this language is used as well.
I think, like when, for instance, when my daughter got a diagnosis, they said, you have autism. They didn't say, oh, you are autistic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it starts and stems perhaps from that, from the medical professionals, where as a parent, oh, okay, so she's got this. So when you come away, you've been told, oh, your child has this. It's not, oh, an integral part of them, and actually it's okay.
And it's automatically negative, though, isn't it? It's like, you have a cold, you have cancer, you have, that's very, very negative, and that's set into your mind the moment you hear it.
Yeah, and I think that we need to move away from looking at autism as that way, especially professionals. When the lady who was the nurse was saying about, with autism, and I was trying to explain, it's really not a condition, and I think you can't lump it in with diabetes, and that whole attitude towards it and kind of mindset of how it is needs to change. I think, because then if people, when they're getting the diagnosis, people are saying, you know what, you're actually autistic, it's just that your neurology is different, and that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. Whereas if you're being told, oh, you've got this condition, you've got this difference, you've got, like you say, automatically it is negative. So I do think that the professionals do have a lot to do with that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a responsibility there as well, because, like I said earlier, how it feeds into self-esteem issues and mental health issues. And I know something we're going to touch on later is kind of the gender issues and stuff like that a little bit. But if you're a child, I don't know, if you're 4, 5, 6, 7, 14, 15, wherever age you get diagnosed, probably pretty late nowadays. But whenever you get that diagnosis, it's kind of, you've struggled up until that point. Most even 6, 7, 8-year-olds are aware that there's differences between them and other children that are running around. And they might not be able to communicate that, but they know that there's something going on. And then they're told that they have something. It's like, it's that negative. You have it, it's negative. But if they're told that they're autistic, and then they're told that, that means that your brain works differently from other people. There are lots of people like you whose brains work like yours. And that's something that's never ever told to autistic kids either, that they're not on their own in this. It's a very solo and isolating thing. And Matt, the self-esteem, the problems with self-esteem that they would have from that, the problems with self-esteem they're already having. And then, like with girls, and girls are generally diagnosed into their teens, if they're diagnosed at all. And they're already having these huge, massive mental health issues because of the fact that, they're masking all the time, and, like lots of boys mask, but girls especially. And, so there's all of that all wrapped up in it, and it all compounds the negativity inside the person as well. And then they wonder why so many autistic teenagers try to, take their own lives and self-harm, and it's all because of this. It's all because of this medical language right at the very root of everything.
Yeah, and I think with my daughter, because sometimes she said to me, I have autism, because she's 10, and I've said, no, you are autistic. That is, that's how you are, and that's okay. And I think it's helped because obviously my husband's autistic and my son's autistic, and I think it's very likely I'm autistic, so we're sort of the autistic family. So we've never looked at it as a negative. I'm not saying that it's not difficult, and I think that's another thing as well. Sometimes parents, when they're struggling, it's like, we're not saying that it's not a struggle, but what we're saying is, don't need to have this whole, with autism, this whole negative language. Doesn't mean that you're not struggling. Of course, sometimes you struggle. And that's what I think, we're not saying that you're not struggling, that it's not difficult.
And I completely appreciate, not from my point, I grew up in effectively an autistic family. Like, my sister's diagnosed, I've got nephews, my dad was undiagnosable according to the professionals that saw him. So like my grandparents, looking back retrospectively, everybody, so it was it was the normal for me. That was my upbringing. I didn't know any different. But from my wife's point of view, who's neurotypical, she's come into this I mean, the first night we met, actually, I warned her off about my nephews. Like, I wasn't diagnosed at the time. It's like, there's autism in my family. Are you really sure you want to go on a second date, kind of thing? But I didn't know any better at that point. It was again, like, all I saw really was my eldest nephew, who was ADHD as well, and so was like swinging from the chandeliers and running up the walls and things. And it was kind of it was a very, very, very overwhelming thing. So from her point of view, now to be married to someone who turned out to be autistic, to now have autistic children as well, it must be, getting her head wrapped around it is a difficult concept, because it's not her normal. That's the biggest, that's the thing that we butt up against most between autistic people and non-autistic people, is our normal isn't their normal. So that's where the clash comes, and it's that communication between the two. And nobody can ever see it from our point of view. We can never see it from their point of view. Not really. They're not inside our heads. We're not inside our heads. But the more that we talk and the more that we communicate and the more that we do this and, put our voices out there, and the more parents that engage with us, and, so we build those bridges and we cross those bridges. And I think, especially like you said, coming into it when your child's first diagnosed, which is usually the start of everybody's autistic journey kind of thing. Their children get, like as adults, their children get diagnosed. When they come into the first time and, they hear this negativity and they don't really know what autism is, they might have seen Rain Man or, Atypical on Netflix, or, like these extremes and these exaggerated themes and myths. And then, you have people like us who, we don't sit and rock in the corner all the time, and we can communicate whatever degree we communicate to. And, we appear to be the same as everybody else. And it must be difficult for them to be able to sort of think, what on earth's going on here? And how do I get my head around this? And how do I look at this in a really positive way? Because they have this child that's melting down and they don't know how to cope with it. And, it's kind of, I don't know, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there. But
I get that. And I think as well, going back to when your child or whoever gets a diagnosis, that's in hospital. It's in a hospital 9 times out of 10, or a hospital-based setting.
Yes.
So again, it's reinforcing.
It's clinical, isn't it?
Problem, that there's an illness, that there's a condition, that there's, because so that's something my child always says to me is, I've been to hospital so many times, there has been other comorbid things that have gone on, but, it must be difficult for a child because, you're always told, oh, you don't go to the hospital unless you're really poorly. So I think that's reinforcing that as well. It's
Absolutely.
I think it's so difficult, and that's why I think it's critical to get the language correct, because like you say, if the parent is on board and is open and wants the whole autistic rather than you've got a condition, then I think that children do stand more of a chance of perhaps their mental health being in a better place ultimately long term.
Absolutely. And if they've got this diagnosis, like you say, from a kind of clinical setting, from a hospital or a CAMS, or where you go in a room and there's a professional sitting there with their legs crossed, they've got a suit on and they've got notes and things, and and then in later life, if the autistic person or child does have mental health issues, they're going to remember that. And that's a reflection of, this negativity started when I got this diagnosis, and now I'm having to go back into this setting because I've got mental health problems and I need support. But it's the same people that are telling me that, and it's making them feel bad about themselves. And it's just such a mixed up mess. It really, really is. And then there's the things like obviously the DSM-5, the diagnostic criteria, and ICD-10 is changing as well. It's folding Asperger's into autism or an ASD diagnosis, but the terms around the labels that the kids and adults still are being given as well, there's such a mix up and confusion about that. It's very, very few people understand that there is very little clinical difference between Asperger's and autism. Classical autism, or Cannell's autism as the Americans would know it, and Asperger's, it's speech delay. That's it. If you're autistic, if you're non-verbal at the fixed neurotypical developmental stage, or you're Aspergic if you talk before them, that's it. And it's, but we fed this information. Aspergic people are all very intelligent, and we're very highbrow, and but I've got many autistic friends who have been diagnosed with autism who've got PhDs. So it's utterly confusing, and you can understand, you know, I've heard parents that say, you know, my child's been diagnosed with high functioning Asperger's. I've had another parent say to me, my child's diagnosed with sensory autism. What on earth is sensory autism? I don't even know what that is, you know, it's not even a thing, you know. And then
and I think it is confusing, and I think that's a good way to lead on to what else we wanted to talk about, was the functioning labels and making those assumptions. And actually, at the talk I did yesterday, I touched a little bit about Olympia, you know, and the fact that, you know, she's non-verbal, but I have multiple conversations with her online, and, you know, she's at university, and, you know, but she doesn't talk. And I was trying to explain what is she less of a person, you know, because she doesn't, and she would obviously be classed as so-called classic autism. You know, it's so damaging to make those assumptions, just because somebody can't always communicate in the way that neurotypicals do, or even some autistics do, doesn't mean that they haven't got the cognitive ability. And that's what I find hugely frustrating. But then equally, you know, like for instance, my son, highly intelligent, but he can't do his shoelaces. He can't use a knife and fork. You know, so again, he's at the other so-called end, and that's damaging for him, because people are saying, "Oh, but you're so intelligent. How can you possibly not be able to?"
Why can't you do your shoelaces up? You're too intelligent to be able to do that.
Stop being so naughty. And
exactly,
you know, he's not. He just cannot do it. You know, he's dyspraxic as well. So. So I don't know what you know. Obviously, I think you explain it really well. So that's why I wanted you to come on and explain.
In terms of functioning labels, you know, you would get the clinical classification of a functioning label is that if you have an IQ below 70, then you are low functioning. That's what a functioning. That's high functioning. Low functioning. High functioning is if you have an IQ above that. That's it. But that's a kind of model that society has kind of dropped along the way, and it's become more, you know, you're high functioning if you can go out and get a job and talk to people and do this and do that and do the other and just live normally, and do normal everyday kind of things. And it's ridiculous, you know. It's like the autism spectrum. You look at functioning as a spectrum. That's what the autism spectrum effectively is. And I always think it should be a 4-dimensional, you know, like if you got a cube that you can see through, and there's a little ball inside it, and that's the autistic person. And the cube is the spectrum. So that little ball is moving around constantly, because at any given minute you could be up here able to climb a mountain and sing at the top of your voice and do deep equations, or in 10 minutes later you could be down on the floor not able to do anything. And it's, you know, and then in given time, like you said about your son, incredibly intelligent, you know, I imagine he's very literate, he's good at maths, but he can't do shoelaces, you know. So where does that fall on a scale? There is no scale that matches that, because he's at both ends of the scale at the same time, and it's utterly ridiculous. And what it does, like you said, it's really, really damaging, because you have people who are labeled high functioning autistic or Asperger's, you know, the expectation of them is that they can go out and they can do everything that everybody else can do, you know. And it's kind of, I went to a conference about a year ago, and this lovely man stood up and said that he had a diagnosis of high functioning Asperger's, which was confusing anyway. And then he went on to tell the story of his life, and I was in tears at the end of it. It was basically, he leapt from one disaster to the next because he couldn't cope in certain situations. You know, he tried to take his own life on multiple times because he just couldn't cope. You know, he crushed and burned out of jobs, had gone through what we would see as autistic burnout several times. That's something else maybe we can talk about a bit later, because lots of people don't even know what burnout is. And you know, so this was his whole life, yet he had a diagnosis of high functioning.
My son
don't equate.
Yeah, my son got they said to him Asperger's, autism spectrum disorder, and then in brackets high functioning. Whereas my other child got autism spectrum disorder. That was it. So I don't.
You know, it's just ridiculous.
And what is so crazy about it is that child can do buttons,
Mm-hmm.
can make toast,
Yes.
can do all that, is not dyspraxic, but then is not at the academic level as the other child.
No. So which hat is it that fits him? There is no hat that fits him, is there? It's, you know, the whole thing is utterly ridiculous. And then, you know, that bigger, you know, like, and then you have kind of, you know, people who have got severe autism, and that is such a lazy diagnosis. There's no such thing as severe autism. Autism is autism, but the comorbids that people have affect the autistic person, you know. So often people who are diagnosed with severe autism have learning difficulties. So, and it's the learning difficulty that impacts on who they are. It's kind of the major part of what their diagnosis should be. It should be really the first diagnosis. But no, they're labelled as severely autistic. And then that's where the negativity comes back in again. It's like everything's blamed on autism, you know, and it always completely and utterly mixed up. I mean, I was diagnosed as Aspergic when I was 23, which is 16 years ago now. I'm not saying that too loud. You know, and at the time there were, as far as I knew, there were no autistic adults around. You know, I was vaguely aware of Temple Grandin, but you know, like the internet was really just starting to happen, and there were no communities online. So I was on my own with it for a very long time. Spent about probably 10 years. I call it like my wilderness years, that I didn't engage with anybody. All I knew was children, and I kind of just took my autism and parked it on a shelf and just carried on as though I hadn't had a diagnosis. So when people, you know, diagnosed late, I really empathise with them, because although I got my diagnosis really generally at quite an early adult age, I didn't know what to do with it. So, you know, I still went through major burnout, didn't know what that meant. And so I went through the same motions as a late diagnosed person, effectively. Now, I was diagnosed by Professor Simon Baron-Cohen, who at the time was coming out with there's all the theory of mind stuff and everything like that, and all of what we now term as rubbish, and that he's still singing from the rooftops. And anyway, so at that time I was given the label of Asperger's. Now at 23, I'd already tried to take my own life at 14. I'd completely blown out of college. I lusted in school until I was 16, went to the sixth form, and then at 17 I walked out one day because I couldn't cope, and I never ever went back. I jumped from like job to job, and then got to the age of 33, had 2 children, had another child on the way. I worked for Durham County Council at the time. I worked for Sure Start, and their children and young people services all got mashed up and amalgamated. People were losing their jobs left, right and centre, and effectively I was unfairly dismissed. I was constructive dismissal. So I was triggered into burnout by this point, and it lasted 9 months. Now, at that point, I nearly lost my wife, my house, my kids, everything, because I didn't know what the hell was going on with me. And I'm a high-functioning Aspergic person.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean,
and
my husband, and I know he won't mind me saying, I would say probably every 3 months he has to spend about 3 or 4 days in bed.
Yeah.
Because he works a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell you how much that takes out of him, how much respect I have for him, because, you know, people will dismiss it. Like if he says, because obviously he got a diagnosis at 40, about 6 months ago, and they will just dismiss, they go, no, you can't be. No, you know, they just, because he supposedly looks normal, you know, they're like,
acts normally, and
But what people don't see is how much it takes literally all of him to get out of bed and to go to work.
Yeah.
You know, and he does that, and I'm so proud of him for doing that. But people just don't realise what it takes, you know, to be like that.
The effort that it takes to put it in, and the masking and the covering everything up, and that's part of that. I mean, part of why we mask is because we're told that autism is negative. You know, we're picked on, and we're singled out, and we stand out from the crowd, and you know, and all of those about, you know, media will tell us that being different is wonderful. You know, they'll have these stories about, you know, this person's, you know, they've got rings through their noses, or they've dyed their hair, or all of these things. And yet ultimately, once you step out of that very narrow focused arena, different is not good. Society does not want different. It wants conformity. It wants us all to be the same. You know, we get born, we grow up, we go to school, we wear uniforms, we learn the same things, and we're encouraged to follow these different narrow career paths. And anybody that doesn't fall into that is seen as an outsider, that, you know, the black sheep, the lone wolf, like all of those terms that, you know, are isolating and separate us. And that's us, and that's what's put on us all our lives, because of the negativity around it and because of the language that's used around it. And, you know, in a way, it would be better if there was no autism diagnosis at all, but everybody was just accepting that people are people, everybody's different people need different supports. If they're given those supports, everybody can do anything that they want, and, you know, within reason. And, you know, it's kind of, but that's not the world that we live in. And, you know, everybody has to be labelled and separated and put in tick sheets and and
this is what I was saying at that meeting, that talk that I did yesterday. I was saying why, you know, I said most autistics are quite free flowing. You know, they're always changing, they're evolving. I said, and I'm sure neurotypicals are. I said, so why is it that we have to fit into these categories and into these boxes? And like I said, you know, I was 40 on Monday, and I still don't know what I want to do. I honestly, and I don't think I've ever known what I really want to do. I'll think, oh yeah, I want to do that, and I'll do it for a bit, and then I think this is really not what I want to do. Right. And I've never, that's just how I feel. And I think because, like you say, you know, where you're kind of in the spectrum and you're moving around and you feel different every day, it's so hard to say, yes, this is me, I am that. I mean, I just don't know how you do that, because
you can't.
I can't. I'm different. You know, like last week, I really struggled. The last few weeks, I've been feeling really low, and I had struggled, and I'm starting to feel better now. And when you have a job, or when you're, you know, being a certain career or whatever, you know, it's really difficult when you're feeling like that, because to keep that mask and to still be able to be like that. So I think it is just really, really draining and difficult.
It is completely. And it's kind of, you know, I touched on people with learning differences just before. There are more autistic people that do not have learning difficulties than do have learning difficulties, yet the outside picture of autism is having learning difficulties. And you know, it's that again, and not to separate us from people who do have learning difficulties, because I'm a huge advocate of them being able to share their voice as well. And, you know, they are an integral part of our community. And, you know, it's just that we have the ability to verbalize a lot of what we say, and they don't necessarily have that ability. And it's, I forgot where I was going with this now. But, you know, it's that kind of, that's what I was going to say. You know, I had a journalist contact me just before I came on with you from Channel 5, saying that they've got an embargoed story that they need to talk about the treatment of people with learning difficulties. Can you help with this? And I messaged her back and said, no, because I haven't got a learning difficulty. You know, why would you assume that I have? You assume that I have because that's the outside view of autism. And it's...
I think you're right in terms of that. Yes, you know, you're autistic, but like you say, the comorbid things that go with it are then assumed that, you know,
that's autism. And it isn't at all.
No, and I think that there can be a lot of misconceptions about that, because it's kind of classed that it's all under the same umbrella. Like,
absolutely.
For instance, my daughter has, my child has got auditory processing disorder, and they said, oh, you know, it's really common with autistics, you know, it's sort of under the same umbrella. So, and I think sometimes perhaps this is what's happening with learning difficulties and with other, you know, they're just saying, oh, it's just an add-on of autism, or an extra part of autism. And I think that actually that's not the case. And so then some of those difficulties aren't related to being autistic. They're related to other, you know, situations and things going on. And that's where the confusion's happening.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's kind of, you know, like autism diagnosis in the UK is under mental health as adults or children. It's you know, CAMS or whatever the different thing is in your area for kids, and it's adult mental health everywhere else. But autism isn't a mental health disorder. It's not a mental health problem. You know, later on in life there can be mental health problems, But a lot of that is attributed to the fact that, you know, we're not treated brilliantly. You know, we're not given the things that we need in order to be able to get through. People don't recognise our abilities. It's all about our deficiencies and deficits, and so it shouldn't be under mental health. And that's another thing as well. That feeds into the myth that autism is a mental health problem, because it's under mental health. And it's, you know, burnout, which we were just talking about before. And, you know, we've talked before the interview, we've talked a lot, obviously, and both of us have described our feelings to each other, and it's kind of both of us agree that what we are going through right now is some kind of burnout, you know, whether it's a minimal one, not maybe necessarily a huge one. And that is often conflated with depression, because
all my life, just claiming quickly, all of my life, I've gone to the doctor and they've said, you're depressed. And I'm like, it doesn't feel right. And they've given me medication. I've taken the medication. It
doesn't do anything. And no, it's not depression. That's the thing. Like you described your husband being in bed for 4 days. If you went up to someone on the street and said, oh, you know, he's really tired, he's been in bed for 4 days, and say, well, he's depressed. You know, it's not depressed at all. You know, I've been treated for depression since I was 12. I've been on often on medication all my life, like you, since I was 12 for depression, and never once. Now that I know what depression is and how it's described by people who are depressed, and you know, that's not me. That's not what I've been feeling. You know, I have when I go through burnout, it's a mental and physical kind of exhaustion. You know, it's kind of, you can't formulate your words very well, you can't get your head straight. You know, I'm really concentrating right now in order to get out what I'm saying. You know, and it's like walking through sludge, kind of and mentally thinking through sludge as well, and which is really abnormal for me, because my brain usually goes at 3,000 miles an hour, and I can feel it trying to go at 3,000 miles an hour, but it just keeps sputtering out. And
I always feel like I've got like a fog, or like a you know, like a mist in my head, and it just won't clear, and I'm trying to feel better, and I can feel dizzy sometimes, and just generally it's the exhaustion is like nothing you've ever felt. It's just like someone has unplugged the whole of your energy, and you just think,
and all your energy's drained out of your feet, kind of thing, just dissipate. And it's, but that's not depression. That isn't depression at all. It's not a mental, I can't physically get myself out of bed, or mentally get myself out of bed, or anything. I'm up, I'm walking around, I'm carrying on doing the things that I normally do. I'm doing them a lot slower, and you know, my anxiety levels are a lot higher, and I know that I can feel myself kind of a bit like a cold spring as well, which is perverse, considering I just said, like, it's like wading through treacle or sludge. But you know, and it's not depression. And again, all of that, to bring it back to where we started, comes back to the language, the mythos around it, and the negativity to it as well. There's such, you know, we talk about awareness and acceptance, but there is, amongst medical professionals, there is a huge lack of understanding of what autism actually is. And you have people working in the UK in these mental health services, you know, they probably got their autism training 10, 15 years ago, and, you know, they might have had top-ups every now and again, but they're working with so many different variations of people and with different problems, and you know, so they can't be autism specialists. The only people that should be are autistic people, to be honest.
And I think as well, it's because, for instance, when my child was in a mainstream school, they said that the one-to-one had training, and I said, like training around autism, and I said, oh, okay. But what it turned out was it was 1 hour's training, and that is the bottom tier of what a one-to-one support person has to have. 1 hour. I mean, I don't know what you're going to learn in 1 hour. I really don't know. So, and that is what is expected. That is like the minimum, you know, of training. And I just think it's really scary that you know, that then they're going to support and care for an autistic child. And the way they're clearly going to obviously do that is it's going to be with autism. It's not going to be an autistic.
It's not going to be autistic, no. And that's the thing. They're constantly just in a way, they're constantly making work for themselves. Because they're just reaffirming all the negativity and all the myths around it constantly, and it's just, you know, we as advocates, you and I and other people that we work with, and, you know, we have to sit and unpick all this. And sometimes I feel like we make huge gains and huge ground, and then something silly comes along, and it's like somebody said to me just before, kind of thing, that they'd sat through a meeting with the NHS, in one of the NHS departments, and it was constantly withs and haves, and it was people that didn't really get what autism was at all, and these are the people that are making decisions for us.
Yeah, it is scary. I think it is. And like yesterday, what I was saying in my talk as well was that, stop trying to pull autistics into the neurotypical world all the time. Like, stop trying to force them to do things that neurotypicals want. Why can't you just listen? What I get frustrated with, and I think there's a whole culture of this, is why don't people just listen? If someone, a child, whoever it is, if someone is saying, I'm autistic and I'm really struggling, why have they got to be degraded and pulled over hot coals and made to feel that that's not the truth?
Yeah.
Why, if someone was diabetic, or someone had whatever, or someone had a physical disability, was saying, I really can't go up those stairs, people would not be saying to them, oh, can get out your wheelchair and get up there. They just wouldn't do that. And that's why what I get really frustrated with, stop judging people on your own feelings.
Yeah.
Like if, for instance, if someone's got really difficulties with sensory and they say, oh, it's really loud in here. Why do people go, no, it's not? I don't understand that, because
well, it is to me, kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, look, it's loud, I'm struggling. Why dismiss that? Why can't you just accept that is how that person feels, and go, do you know what? I really understand that. And that's what I do with my children. If my children are telling me something, then I'll respect that, and help them as best I can. I won't dismiss it and tell them, well, no, that you're fine, you can manage. And that's
Dad, you're not autistic then, Kate, because you can't do that, because that's seeing something from other people's point of view.
Well, yeah, I know.
Which is just shows how much rubbish it is.
I actually think sometimes autistics are more have too much empathy. I definitely feel like that,
Yeah.
And I know my children do. They take on people's emotions intensely.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother story.
That's a whole other conversation, isn't it? But it just shows the ridiculousness of it, and it's kind of, we're accused of being so narrow and blinkered and rigid and inflexible, and yet actually, from my perspective, because I'm very much a people watcher, and I've always been. That's probably how I learned to march really, really well, and looking at other people around me and out in public and stuff, it's often the people who are not autistic are the ones that are actually really, really inflexible and really, really rigid, and have to conform to everything, and need everything in its place. And it's really interesting that we are the ones that are this picture of us has been painted. And I think a lot of that picture is actually self-projection from neurotypical people. That they can't see that these are the issues that they're having, so they project it onto us because we don't fit their model. And it's kind of, that's what society is, really. It's and I was going to say before, it's like this idea of conformity and this idea of what societal norm is, which is what holds us in, and which is what causes us to to have such a lot of negativity in our lives. I was thinking before about the like the beach body perfect things that you always get running up to the summer and stuff like that, and the way that women are depicted in magazines, and how that impacts on their self-esteem and things. And how many women look like that model that's on the front of the magazine? None of them do. But I
don't think I've ever seen someone walk past me like that.
No, not at all. And even the model on the front of the magazine doesn't actually look like that, because she's been airbrushed and what have you. And it's
this idea and this, oh, you've got to be like this, but actually in reality, no one's ever going to reach.
No one's ever like that. So where does that come from? I don't understand. Where does this ideal come from? It's like the there is a myth that among women that all men like skinny women, and it's, in my experience, that's not true. It's the complete opposite, and it's that's a sweeping generalization, but it's that kind of
it's that kind of thinking. Yeah.
I don't understand where that kind of thinking comes from, and I don't understand where this model of perfectness comes from, and that this is how people should be when nobody is like that. That's completely irrational and illogical to me. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's and that's what I was saying, yesterday at the talk was, stop trying to pull, autistics into that. Why can't you go into their world? Why can't you try and understand? Why have you always got to try and change?
Yeah.
And that's one thing with my children that I've always done is accepted them. Like if we have a family, something going on with the family and it's a party or something and they really, really don't want to go, I have never forced them to go. Never. I always say, this is what it's going to be like. This is what, and if they really say, do you know what, I really, really struggle with that, then I wouldn't. And I know some people go, but you're the parent, you should make them do that.
Yeah.
But I don't get that. I don't get why do I have to make them
and
do
a lot
that?
of a lot of the people that would say that probably wouldn't do that to their own kids though. But yet they still say it to you. And that's
this is the thing about this unspoken society thing, that is one of those things where you're supposed to do. Oh, well, I'm the parent, I have to force them to do something they don't want to. But I just don't think that that's productive, and I don't think it's fair. Like as an adult, someone wouldn't force me to do that. So I don't get why children are treated like that. That's what I was saying yesterday. I really don't get this whole thinking, why can't we listen to them? Why can't, they say how they really feel? And then the thing is, especially as an autistic, it could have took all of your will to say something and then you're just shot down. Why are you going to want to say something?
Dismissed instantly. Why would you say anything? And I think the parental thing there, it's kind of like going back to the diagnosis and the negativity that comes around the diagnosis of their children. And I think a lot of parents, because they're ill-informed and ill-equipped to be able to handle the diagnosis, they don't understand what it means. They don't, they might have read lots of books, but it's lots of books by neurotypical people that, that reinforces what the negativity basically. And it's kind of, I think that the diagnosis scares a lot of parents to the point where parenting instincts just flies out of the window. That a lot of parenting is going with your gut. If you listen to your gut, you know that you're going to do your kid, as long as your kid's happy and all right, as long as you're happy, all right, they're the important things. But a lot of that just seems to fly out the window. I saw a post on Facebook the other day, and it horrified me, to be honest, by a parent who I've seen post before, who's talked about her daughter's high anxiety, the fact that they're only at school 2 days a week, so there's obviously a lot going on there. Her elder brother, who was knocking on 8, she's about 12, 13. Her older brother is about 18, wanted to go to Disneyland in Florida. So the mum and dad had arranged for a surprise holiday for them to Disneyland. Yeah. So she's obviously got this little girl through the air. She was very proud of the fact that she had they were flying from Manchester, very proud of the fact that they had their autism passports for the airport and stuff like that. Had gone off to Disney World. Now, didn't hear anything for a week, and then there was a photo appeared, and it was prefaced with the words, "I hate autism." She'd taken a photo of a little girl at the water park. Now, the girl was covered head to foot in a towel. Couldn't see her, all you could see was the towel. She's been sat like this for a week, apparently. She doesn't, and this came out in the post. She doesn't like her skin being exposed. Doesn't like people seeing her skin. She doesn't like crowds. Doesn't like noise. She's absolutely hating it. But she prefaced this with, "I hate autism." So she dragged her little girl, however many thousands of miles it is to Florida, on a 12-hour flight. Dragged her through probably one of the busiest places on the planet for a week, and was blaming autism at her daughter's reaction to that. Now, my reaction to that, and I said this to my wife, said, why the hell did she take her? Yeah. Why would you go there? Why would you do this? Why would you put her through this? Why would you put yourself through this? It's, and so that little girl is going to come back from, a trip I've never been, but my wife's been. She told me going to Disneyland is not a holiday. It's like going to work for 2 weeks. You walk for hundreds and hundreds of miles, and there's so much sensory overload for neurotypicals, let alone autistic people.
You've got the heat.
Yeah, yeah, the heat as well. You know, a little girl that doesn't like her skin being exposed. So, you know,
My,
when you take her
my
to
child,
some,
my child really gets triggered by heat,
yeah,
massive. So we've never done abroad
uh-huh,
because I know that they wouldn't want to get on the plane, and I
yeah,
know that the temperature's not right.
mhm.
So why would we do that? You
You
know,
wouldn't, would you? And this is like I said, it's like, I mean, I know this is a really extreme example, but in a lot of the comments and questions that you get from parents, it's like, are you really thinking about what you're writing here? You're really asking me this question. It's like, if your child was not autistic, you wouldn't be asking me this question. So why are you asking it now? And it's kind of, there seems to be, they get this diagnosis, I don't know, they go into like this, it's like fight or flight mode to a degree, I think. And you know, they have, all of a sudden they start needing support services and help from schools and help from health services, and they don't get any of it, so they start fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. But the fight they conflate is not against professionals. They conflate it with autism. So they're fighting autism. You know this, and I'm sure this is where this autism mum thing comes from. You know, like these autism warrior parents and things like that. It's like they're fighting the autism, but they're not fighting autism. They're fighting education and health and professional people that don't understand what's going on with their child, but say that they do. So they're effectively lying to parents, good willing or not, and it's and so all parenting instinct just goes out the window. Autism becomes this elephant in the room that you're constantly battling against, and it
yeah, I
doesn't
think as
need to
well.
happen.
I think that perhaps parents are thinking, oh, if they weren't autistic, it wouldn't, it
It
wouldn't
wouldn't
be
be
like
like this. Yeah.
this. you know and the thing is, I think that if you try, like for me, the biggest thing that when my child got the diagnosis, the biggest thing I thought is knowledge is power.
Mm.
That I need to know everything about autism because then I can support the best I can,
Yeah.
and that has definitely been life changing. And obviously then the sort of realization that I'm probably likely on the spectrum, but I get the sensory. I understand sensory difficulties now.
Mhm.
I get that. I know why it's a struggle to go to the supermarket. I know
Yeah.
why it's a struggle to go outside. And we do everything we can to support that and help that. But if you don't learn and you don't embrace that and you don't say, do you know what, this is how it is, but it isn't going to be bad if we do this and this and this. Because if I put all of the little adjustments in place that are needed, it's okay.
Life's a doddle. It's yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm not
it's
saying she doesn't know, that there's not bad
yeah,
days.
of course.
I'm not saying that. Of course there is.
No.
But what I'm saying is, there normally you would start to recognize triggers, you'd start
Yeah.
to and see, and you gain more control that way,
Mhm.
just by trying to pull them into the neurotypical world and trying to force them into the Disney world and force
Mhm.
them into these. All that's happening is it's awful for you and awful for them, and then
Yeah.
it's just a complete mess, I think, a lot of the time.
I read a quote this morning by, this was a few years ago, so I don't know if he's still there. It's the head teacher of Treetop School in London, who is an ambitious about autism school. So they're an ABA school. And this journalist had gone into the school and had a tour and everything, and had noticed that in the classrooms were massively brightly coloured. There was, the kids' work was up everywhere, and it was really bright and like really. And the journalist said, like, I was a bit taken aback by how bright it was, bright for me, kind of thing. It was a bit overwhelming for me. The head teacher said that the reason that they do this is because in the real world, that's what the real world's like, so we have to get them used to that. So, from my point of view, that's completely the wrong mindset. The real world should not be like that. And they do these autism quiet hours and supermarkets and things like that. Everybody benefits from having the music and the lights turned down, not just autistic people. And it's the real world does not have to be as bright and glazzy and overwhelming as it is, and it's ridiculous.
It was like, we went out on Saturday to the Harvester, and we was in the toilet. I was in the toilet with my child, and they said, "Why do we need music when we're in the loo?" The music was like,
Do
they
you
were
have
like,
music in the toilet at home?
"Yeah, why do we do this when we're going to the toilet?" I said,
Uh-huh.
"No," but yeah, exactly. Why? And I do think it's hugely overwhelming.
Mm.
All of it is just. unnecessary. But
a lot of what goes on in the world is completely unnecessary, and it would, like I said before, it wouldn't, turning down the world a little bit, muting the world a little bit, would benefit everybody, not just autistic people. It's overwhelming for kids and babies. Shopping centres are overwhelming for kids and babies and things, and like obviously we had autistic children, so we avoided them. But it's like, I know people that drag their kids to the shopping centres every weekend. The kids hate it, absolutely despise it. They have a tantrum, they don't want to be there, they want to go to McDonald's, they don't want to get there. They're all over the place, and it's because they're they're in crowds of people. It's noisy, it's bright, it's smelly, it's just horrible. It's not a nice thing, and the world is set up like that for some reason. I don't understand. Yeah. And I think a lot of it's capitalism, because it's people like shops competing against each other and things like that. And again, that's a whole other story, but like conversation. But the whole world seems to be geared to be anti-people, not just anti-autistics. And it's this idea again, but like what that head teacher said, we're preparing them for what the real world's like. It's like, no, you're not really. You're preparing them to mask, you're preparing them to hide themselves, you're preparing them to struggle. You're not showing them that there can be another way.
I mean, from wherever we go, we've got a sensory survival kit that we take, and it's got sunglasses, it's got ear defenders, it's got a sensory, something like this, what I've got now that I'm always using. And there's like a little blanket in there. There's all, so that if we're bombarded by all that, we've got,
you've got an escape route. You've got a bit of a, it's a medical patch while you get the hell out of Dodge, isn't it?
Exactly. You do what you need to do to get by, and I think that is what needs to be taught. To live an autistic centered life, not to say you've got to not be like that, you've got to be like this. Why not say, well, these are the difficulties. If we do this, this, and this, things can be a lot better. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it could be a lot better.
But it's not perfect for anybody, is it?
That's what I was about to say. Whose life is perfect, you know? So yes, I think the main sort of takeaway from this is really consider language.
Yes.
Think about how autistics feel when you're using that language. And what I wanted to touch on briefly was I'm trying to learn a lot more about around gender and what types of language to use. So bear with me if I get anything wrong, or I don't mean to offend anyone, or I'm really, really trying to learn because my child is non-binary. They're not really male or female. So I'm sort of going through that and trying to find my way and, learn what terms to use and gain an understanding of that. And I was thinking that, and I said to you earlier, didn't I, that, again, people can dismiss that as being important. But I was thinking, and I thought, I'm female, I identify as female. And I was thinking, how would I feel if someone kept saying to me, yes, sir, or, oh, he, or male, or, I really wouldn't like that. I'd think, well, hold on, that's not who I am or how I feel. So I think, again, even that, and that's why I really want to learn and really want to understand and know and be able to include everybody. That's what I want on my page. It's about inclusion, and it's for everybody. I know it's Girls Autistic Journey, but ultimately it's evolved, and now I feel it's for everybody, and not gender specific, whoever. And so I'm trying to sort of learn a little bit more about that. So just to put that out there in case I stumble and I make a few mistakes. And
I think it's really important what you're doing, and that's because it's what we said before, wasn't it? That you'd done an infographic the other week, hadn't you? And some non-binary people had said, hold on, you completely missed the non-binary people off of this. You've done he's and she's, and and you took that and you didn't really know what to do with it, but you went away and you changed it and you consulted some people, didn't you? And then so you learn what language was not going to exclude those people, and that's a really, it's reflective of what we were talking about the language around autism as well. It's kind of, if you address someone in a certain way and they say, please don't call me that should be enough. You don't need an explanation, you don't need anything. And it's something I wanted to touch on before and I've forgotten is, you know, it's really important if someone identifies as having autism, it's really important to respect that, from my opinion. I wouldn't say, no, you don't, you're autistic. You know, it's like you've had that conversation with your daughter, as currently she is. And but you know, if you found an autistic person on the street and started talking to them and they said, no, I have autism, it's like, fine, that's if that's where you want to identify. But what is really, really key for me and what is really important is that autistic person understands why they're using that language. And I genuinely think that if more people learn about the language and learn and understand why the language is being used, they wouldn't use it.
Yeah.
It's
All right.
it really, really, really does make a huge difference to people, and it makes a huge difference to the way that we are treated as people as well.
Yeah, and I think again it's about that just dismissing it and thinking, well, I feel all right about that, so I'm sure.
Yeah, so the other person must do. It doesn't work like that, does it?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's funny because I don't always find that autistics are like that. I kind of find if I say to an autistic, please, can you address me so-and-so, or can you do, they will.
Yeah.
I really find that, you know.
I think generally as a people we are really open-minded and open to, you know, if someone identifies in a certain way, that's who they are. That's kind of a blanket kind of statement, I think, generally for us. And I think a lot of the resistance comes again from neurotypical people or non-autistic people who, you know, really struggle with that. And it's kind of, conformity seems really important to them. So, you know, and that's supposed to be our thing.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, a lot of autistics, like I say, they're free-flowing and forever changing. And, you know, and I think that sometimes perhaps non-autistics find that challenging or difficult to pinpoint, and you can't really put it into anything, can you? It's not boxable, if that makes sense, you know. So I think
absolutely,
and that becomes a struggle.
And I think one last thing I know you want to scout through the comments and see if there are any questions and stuff, but very quickly I wanted to say I know that there will be people probably watch this that will be like, you know, you're talking about people with learning difficulties, you know, you're not like my child is the common kind of thing, and it's kind of, I just wanted to say I'm selective mute, and you know, in anxious situations, when I'm anxious, I can't speak. The words claw and get stuck in my throat. This happens a lot. There are sometimes days when I do not speak. So for anyone that thinks that I can't identify with someone who is non-verbal or isn't verbal all the time, then it's important to realise that you watching this can't judge us because you don't know what we've got going on in here.
Yeah. I mean, my child's very much like that. They, you know, if they're having a really difficult day, then the communication is through an app. It can be through an app, it can be through drawing, or it might be no communication at all, or it could even be through an animal. So they'll be a cat for the day.
Yeah.
And, you know, and
that's exactly my little girl. She's a different cat every day.
Yeah, it's been a panda a lot lately. But it's like what I was quickly getting on this, but I thought this was quite interesting. When I was saying at the talk yesterday about, you know, my child being an animal a lot, and I was saying it's okay for people to pretend they're princesses though, isn't it? You know, why is it that if an autistic is an animal and wants to pretend to be an animal, but obviously is probably takes it to a little bit of a higher level and is more intense, that's not right, that's not okay. But if some child can be a princess and I'm a princess and I want to, that seems
or a little boy plays football and wants to be Harry Kane and is Harry Kane, and you know, it's the same thing. I
don't get these judgments, and that's what I was saying. I've never stopped my child doing that. And, you know, like sometimes we've even thrown balls and when they're a dog and, you know. And do you know what? I think that to me is an escapism. It's a way of coping with anxiety. It's a way of dealing with a confusing world. And I think it's actually really resilient because it is self-regulation. It's thinking, right, I'm going to give myself some time and space. So, and it's not hurting anybody. So I don't know why it's not okay. And that's what I was saying yesterday at the talk is, you know, I'm not going to stop my child from doing that. You know,
absolutely not.
Wouldn't. But I think there'd be a lot of horrified parents that would, and that would, oh my goodness, this is, you know, you can't behave like this. And you know, and I think that that's what we've got to get past is,
Yeah.
you know, there's a reason for the,
there's an underlying root cause, and that's the, you know, like behavioral therapies don't address root causes, they just want to change behavior, and it's, you know, and that's that biggest thing with those kind of things. It's autistic behavior is not non-autistic behavior, but autistic behavior is there for a reason. It happens for a reason, you know, and quite often it's really good reasons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've had to look through. I don't know if there's any questions as such that I can see. If there is anything after, I'll have another look through once we finish, and if there is,
I'll be hanging around anyway. So if there's anything after, I can always jump on as well. So
and yeah, but no, I think it's. I hope that this gets sort of the word out there that, you know, it is really important about language, and it is really important to consider functioning labels, and, you know, just really what pressure you're putting that person under, because I think you're boxing them again, aren't you? You know, you're putting them in that category, and like you say, I love that description of what you said about the little ball when you go, because it is true. And I think that, you know, like every people, like I was saying, this is what you say, everyone has bad days, everyone has good days, and I think sometimes for autistics it's just a little bit more intense, you know, and that's what it is, it's just a little bit more magnified. So, you know, and that you just have to respect that people are different every day, as are autistics, you know, and I think that's what you've got to embrace and understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are you happy? Is there anything else you want to add, or?
No, I think we've probably bored everybody to death now. I've enjoyed it, but
yeah, so I'll leave it up on the page. I'll pin it to the top of the page, and then it can stay there. And yeah, I think it's been brilliant. And we'll definitely have to do it again.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a real pleasure, Kay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you taking time and doing that for me.
No problem at all.
Speak soon.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.